Greetings. And for those who don't know me, I'm Anonymous Andrew from the Anonymous Andrew Podcast Studios. And this is my year in review. It is December 30th, 2025. And I have been podcasting now. This will be my third year coming up, I believe, in January. Uh, time, I'm not sure exactly the date, but I'll be completing 3 years. And I felt that I needed to address because so much has changed over the years. And I'm going to release this on YouTube. I'm going to release it on my podcast, Apple and Spotify and all the platforms, and also on the Weekend Rant, which you're probably wondering, what is he talking about? So 3 years ago, I was in a relationship with a Latina woman who, for the first year, we were rainbows and unicorns, just like many other relationships. Everything was just beautiful and happy, and you could see nothing in the future that would tell you anything would go wrong. However, the red flags were all there. But what was in her mind and what was in my mind, I just saw beauty and I saw innocence and young. I shouldn't say innocence. She was married for many, many years, but she was out of the marriage and she was looking to move on with her life. And I thought she chose me and I chose her and we proceeded. But in that first year, there were so many red flags that this was just a hop skip. This was just a stepping stone for her. This was just a buffer between the marriage that was 20 something years and then going into her next phase of her life. And I was just there to help her buffer, to catch her. Of course, I didn't know that then. At that time, I was very much in love with her and very much enamored with her. And you don't swim between these two red flags, but they're huge. These were huge red flags. And yet I ignored them. I said, that can't be. So, for example, I would catch her like lying to me, and I would catch her cheating, and I would catch her hiding text messages. I'm not here to rehash all that. Go listen to my podcast and you'll get all that. What happened was I needed to get my story out there because I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a recovering I live with bipolar disorder, and I've had a pretty nasty life. I've hurt many people in my life. I've hurt my family, my children, and somehow I managed to hold on to a career. It's miserable. I'm very unhappy at my job, but it's a 25 to 30-year job that I'm in, and I'm going to be retiring soon in the next couple of years. But all that aside, I fell in love with podcasting. Getting my story out there was something that I never thought would be soul cleansing. Just I went out and I bought this Mac, and then I have 2 microphones now. So, like, I have another microphone over here, and that was just your basic Amazon microphone. And then, of course, within a year or 2, I upgraded to a Shure MX7, which is a much better dynamic quality microphone. I went out and I just started to build upon, but none of this was being financed, any of it, because if you know anything about podcasting, it's a medium that's big and new, and people are making money on it, lots and lots of money. But those are the high names like the Joe Rogans and the Damona Hoffmans, and I'm going to draw blanks, but some of the real top 100, the top 500 people. But it depends on the genre too. There's politic podcasts, there's romance podcasts, there's socioeconomic, there's mental health podcasts. You name it. There's a podcast. If you like to crochet, there's a podcast about crocheting. They're all out there. So it's just about hitting that niche of tapping into an audience that will sit there week after week and listen to what you have to say. Are you an expert at what you're talking about? I wasn't an expert. What I was an expert in was alcoholism, and I was an expert in mental illness because not only did I suffer from a mental illness, but I also helped people. I volunteered many years I'm not going to mention the organization, but it was two big, large national organizations that I volunteered 15 years of my time to. So I've, I I felt that I had some background in getting out there and telling my story about what happened to me and why I allowed this woman to do what she did to me and why I failed to see what she was doing. And in the end, it crippled me. It brought me to my knees. And again, I'm not going to go into the details and have 4 seasons, over 300 episodes on my podcast. So let me talk about that for a second. So it started out as the Anonymous Andrew podcast. And I did that because I wanted to tell the whole story about this woman, but she was an illegal immigrant coming in from another country. And while I was so angry at her, I felt it would not do any justice to her or me. Of course, a lot of us want to seek revenge. I could have had her deported. I could have reported her. This was when we were seeing each other. Trump was in office the first time. I could have had her on a boat back to her country. Not a problem, because she had done something illegal in America to stay in America, which was fraudulent. Anyway, it's all behind me. It's all water under the bridge. I'm just letting you know that I took the high road. And when I didn't know anything about podcasting, nothing. I just learned the technical part of it, buy a microphone, get your recording software, which I started with Zoom, then I moved to Riverside. I went to Squadcast, and I went to Riverside. Then I had to subscribe to all the little things like Canva and Calendly and all the tools that you need to produce a podcast. And the Anonymous Andrew podcast, believe it or not, took off. Within a year, I was close to 10,000 downloads. And I think it was unique. It was different. It was a novelty. Here comes this guy calling himself Anonymous Andrew. Has nothing to do with recovery, by the way. So, if you're thinking about the Alcoholics Anonymous, it had nothing to do with that. I was trying to be anonymous so I wouldn't give away the identity of the woman that cheated on me. I just felt that I still loved her enough. And even though she really, really hurt me, I wasn't out to out her. I wasn't out to get her arrested. So I called myself the Anonymous Andrew podcast, and I told my story. But that quickly, after maybe 20 episodes, became dull. It was like, all right, so I told my story. Here it is. And I gave people the warning signs of what to look for in a relationship if somebody's gaslighting you and if they're a narcissist. She had some very, very severe mental illness diseases. She was borderline personality. And I'm going to label her because I have the background and I know what the symptoms are. No, I'm not a doctor, and no, I'm not, and I can't be slandered here or slandering her, whatever, because I'm not mentioning her name. But I had to make a decision because 20 to 30 episodes in, it was getting stale. And so then I got approached by a gentleman by the name of Alex Sanfilippo, and he was starting a new company called Podmatch. And Podmatch is now the third largest podcast network. So that is a group of podcasters who all form a network. So SiriusXM is the first one. The second one is iHeartRadio. And the third one is Podmatch. These are not distributors. So you're thinking, well, what about Apple? What about Spotify? They are not distributors. They're not networks. They're distributors. So like RSS is a distributor. Apple is a distributor. They take your podcast and they will push it out into the podcast ecosphere. But to be part of a nation like the United Nations or the United States of America are part of America. The 50 states are part of the United States. So these podcasts are all part of one group called Podmatch or SiriusXM or iHeartRadio. And there's 10 more podcast networks out there. And Alex came to me and said, I'd like you to join us. I've been listening and I think you got talent and blah, blah, blah. And I joined and it's a small fee. And then Alex says, we're going to pay you. So you come on You interview the guests that we give you if they fit your genre. So I was starting to interview people who had been cheated on, experts or authors or psychiatrists or coaches who had some insight into what happened to me. So I would interview them and I would get paid for that. A lot of money. Okay. We're talking $2 an interview, you know, but if you did enough of them and they added up, like every 2 to 3 months, I'd find $100 in my bank account, you know. But keep in mind that the subscription to some of these software, like Riverside, is $300 a year. So I wasn't even coming close to breaking even. But I was addicted to podcasting. And along that way, I stumbled upon something called the Twin Flames universe, which is a cult, and it's a cult based in Michigan. And it came to my attention, and again, I'm not going to really go into long stories, but somebody came to me and they wanted to talk about Twin Flames because they said it's a cult and it's doing an abomination to the concept of the Twin Flames, which is a Greek mythology. So the Greeks believed that you had a soulmate, like a twin flame, but there was only 144,000 of them, and there was certain criteria and certain stages you had to go through. But anyway, this woman from Europe contacted me and said, I'd like to do a recording with you about explaining about the twin flames and how it's different than the cult that the American people are falling for this cult in Michigan. And I said, sure. So I had her on and it did wonderful. But here's the problem. It did wonderful in the cult community. So I pushed it out as a cult. I hashtagged it and keyworded cult, and it got a lot of attention. And then I decided to go with that for a couple of weeks. I went out and I interviewed more cult people. And then the Anonymous Andrew podcast audience said to me, you're doing us a disservice. We're tuning in to listen to about your dating, not cults. So I had to make a decision because I was kind of like, it's like you going to the theater to see, I don't know, pick up the Phantom of the Opera, but you end up seeing Cats. You're not getting what you pay for. Although I'm not charging anybody. But at that point, I had become so interested in the cult dynamic culture that I said, this is something I would really like to investigate. So I started surfing the internet, Facebook, social media, and looking for the cult clan, the people the cult community, ex-cult, I should say, not actively I wasn't looking for people who were in cult, people who were escaping cults and wanted to tell their story. And then I came across somebody by the name of Melody. And Melody ran a cult recovery, it's called the Cult Recovery and Escape Group. Melody, forgive me. I've never gotten the name right. And then she went and changed it on me, so it just confused me. But that's where I met Melody, and she was the administrator, and I approached her and I said, "Hey, I'm looking to start a cult podcast. You seem to be very well. You're an activist. You're immersed into this cult universe. You have a cult Facebook group. Would you like to try to do a co-host podcast?" And she jumped on it, and we did a couple test runs and we did a couple of recordings, and it clicked. We clicked, and Cultimatum was born. Okay, so we needed to name the cult podcast, and it just came to me. So I took the word ultimatum and put the word cult in front of it. So Cultimatum. It doesn't necessarily make any sense. It just, to me, it kind of made it like once the cults suck you in, they love bomb you and they get you, you're kind of stuck in the cult. You're not ultimatum. It just seemed like it worked in my head. It just seemed like a neat word and it caught on. There's no such word as cultimatum. So I kind of coined a new word. And it is now the name of the podcast. And we have recorded our 100th episode and it is being released. She told me January 10th. So I don't know when you're going to see this video. I'm going to release it in the next day or two. But anyway, so that's doing great. Okay. So the Cult podcast took off, and Melody does an amazing job at finding guests, booking guests, doing the research on the cults, and I do the executive producing. So I'm the one that's got all the editing software, and I will do the marketing. Well, she does the marketing promos, but I'm the one that like connects all the dots. Okay. So I'm the executive producer, she's the producer, and it works. We have a great, 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 great relationship. And it's platonic, of course, and because she's married and she's in the Midwest and I'm in New York. This is just a working co-host relationship. And let me jump to the third podcast. Along the way, I was doing something called the Weekend Rant, and I was mixing that in with the Anonymous Andrew podcast. And one day, I don't know, I think it was like maybe season 2, somewhere in there, I had this, what I thought at the time, a brilliant idea to rebrand the Anonymous Andrew podcast. The numbers were starting to dip, the listenership. And I was up around 10,000, but then it stalled. And I looked and I talked to Podmatch and I talked to other people that I know. Of course, podcasting is all about networking and getting support and help. And one podcast that normally we don't see each other as competitors, especially if we're at different niches. If we're in the same niche, like we're both dating podcasts, we might consider ourselves competitors. But I've also seen it work where, like, I've been on some other dating podcasts and they've been on mine, and we swap. And sometimes it works because what they cover and what I cover are not necessarily the same. Dating and marriage and relationships and divorce and all that in between, there are so many nuances to it that you can't possibly cover the dating, the relationships, the marriage, the breakups, the heartbreak, the divorces, all in one podcast. I mean, you could. There's a couple of podcasts I can think that have been around for 8-10 years, and they basically do cover everything. But those are the top 2%, whatever. I had this brilliant idea to change the brand of my podcast, which was the death of my podcast. I went from the Anonymous Andrew podcast because it was no longer about anonymity. I didn't need to hide myself anymore. But I had already established a brand. I had already created a website called the Anonymous Andrew Podcast Studios, or anonymousandrewpodcast.com. And I had created a brand, and all of my social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Pinterest, YouTube, all of them, X, were all the Anonymous Andrew podcast. The brand had been established. So I came up with the help of ChatGPT, and I'll say this right now: I'm a big proponent of AI. If it's used properly and it's kept within its guardrails, it can help you. It can also hinder you because it can be wrong a lot of the time. But if you just be patient with it, double check its facts sometimes. So I'll go to ChatGPT and then it'll say something and it just doesn't sound right. So I'll go to Gemini, I'll go over to Google, or I'll go over to Perplexity, or I'll go to, I don't like paying for too many. I do have the paid version of Chat, but I don't budget, I can't buy 5 different chat bots. So anyway, I'll check it with Google, or I'll say, Google, Gemini, can you just verify this fact? Whatever. So we came up with digital dating. And there was a podcast called Digital Dating about 5 to 7 years ago, but it's defunct. It started, it had put out a couple of episodes, and then it died. And I looked it up and there was no copyright, so I grabbed it. And yeah, so I changed my podcast to Digital Dating with Anonymous Andrew, because I had to keep the Anonymous Andrew in there. Now, with all that said, that was probably the worst move that I made in my podcast career. For a couple of months, it had that new feeling to it, like it was a new digital dating. I rebranded it, new graphics. I went on social media and I said, yes, we're still Anonymous Andrew, but here's my studio. So I created a studio and I said, within these studios is going to be Digital Dating, Weekend Rant, and Cultimatum. And we produce all 3 podcasts. just for a brief moment there, it caught some attention from the public. And with Podmatch, I got to give Alex and Alicia a lot of credit. They helped me along, but it was overkill and it was too much. And on top of all of this, I have a full-time job and I have grandchildren and I have a life and I'm an avid pickleball player and I'm single and I'm trying to find I'm dating. I'm not actively at this moment because we're in the middle of the holidays, but I'm looking for companionship. So all that said, it became too much, and I had to come to a decision in the last month. In December of 2025, I decided that because Cultimatum producing a huge, much more numbers, it actually surpassed digital dating by almost 5,000 listeners. So I was hovering around 11 and 12,000 listeners on digital, and Cultimatum, they were up to 15, I think. Melody would check that number for me. But and on top of that, then I started monetizing. So my platform started giving us paid advertisers, but you only get paid if somebody listens. So if somebody like if you're tuning in, I'm going to get 20%. Or not, I shouldn't say 20%. I might get 20 or 30 cents on the dollar, whatever. Digital dating was just dropping and dropping and dropping. And I was down to 25. I'm coming clean here, folks. I was down to 25, 30, 50, maybe listeners a week. And you can't make money on that. I was pulling in maybe literally like $6 a month. It just wasn't paying for it. And all the work that is involved with producing a podcast, folks, you have no idea. For those who are listening or think that all it is you buy a mic and some software and a computer, and a lot of people will do it right on their cell phone or right on their iPad. And yes, you can do that. Your quality is not going to be super great, but there is so much planning, scheduling, booking, promoting, marketing. It's overwhelming for one podcast. And I had three. So I had to make a decision. I decided to close season 4, which is another thing. So podcasting, you can just have episode 1 and go all the way up to 1,000, over the course of several years. Or if you want to change courses in your podcast storytelling, you could do season 1, season 2, season 3, and the seasons can vary. And that's what I did. Season 1 was about the ex-girlfriend. Season 2 was about me living in my skin. Season 3 was learning about now it's time to get back out there. And then season 4, I jumped into dating apps and how to really learn how to date in the modern dating world, because honestly, it's a mess out there. All right. And if you're single and you're looking for dates, either on the dating apps or in the real world, you know what I'm talking about. It is a mess out there. And I have a whole dissertation on that on my podcast. So as to why that's happening, and I'm not going to get into it here. I'm just here to give you a year in review. I'm giving you some background as to where the Anonymous Andrew Podcast Studios is likely to go in 2026. So let's see what time I have here. Okay, we're almost at the 30-minute mark. So what I did is I looked back in 2025 to see at who were my most listened to episodes. One of them jumped up and caught my eye, and it would have been the one that I would have never thought. And and I'm going to tell you why in a second. When I had this gentleman on, I was very, very, very interested in him. He was dynamic and he was an amazing man. His name was Kobe Fawkes. And Kobe Fawkes is a gay porn star. And he created his brand on OnlyFans. And he made good money. And he's from Australia. And he did my podcast back in March 19th of 2025. He passed away 70 days later. I cannot get the results of his death, like why he died, but I have a pretty good idea, and it's not my business to tell, it's the family's business. But that reel on Instagram is still circulating. So when I do a podcast on digital dating, I always put a promo reel out. So the guest comes on, I make a promo reel. Rivers. So one of the good things I want to talk about Riverside too. One of the things about Riverside is they have a fantastic UI, a great dashboard, and they do everything for you. It's expensive, but when you record and it works right, you do very little. It's all done for you. All the exports and all the editing and all the AI and everything is done. You just have to click which one you want to put up, and the promos and the YouTubes, it's all done for you. It is costly, but it takes a lot of those hours and hours and hours of editing sitting behind this. Because 2 years ago, I would sit here on a Saturday for 3 or 4 hours and listen and watch. I do my editing on GarageBand, and I would have to sit there and do edit, cut, and paste, edit, take out the ums, take out the ahs, and it would drive me insane. And then all of a sudden, Cultimatum, I got to do that. So next thing I know, I'm doing 3 podcasts on the weekend, and my weekends were shot. By the way, I never really got into the weekend rant. I just want to quickly tell you about that. The weekend rant came about in the Anonymous Andrew podcast phase, where I decided to rant about things in life that I really were not happy about. I would come home one night, and let's say it took me 2 hours to get home because of a traffic jam that was so unnecessary. So you get past the traffic jam, and it's 2 people in the right lane, and they had a fender bender, and they refuse to pull off onto the shoulder, and they refuse to, like, they want to call the police. And so now at 6 o'clock, and I live outside of New York City, and I say we, so if you know New York City, like the LIE, Cross Island Parkway, Bell Parkway, Southern State Parkway, you have to sit in three or 4 lanes of traffic for maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours, because, and God forbid it's snowing or raining. The point is that I would get home so riled up, so angry, because 2 people wouldn't. Folks, there's millions of us in the city. We have to learn to, like, be courteous, and so if you tap somebody's bumper, get the fuck off the road. See, that's what I do. I go off on these rants because it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. And it's one thing if there was an accident and a car flipped over and somebody's head is hanging out the front windshield window. I get that, okay? That you got to shut the road down, that you got to detour traffic. But even then, I am calling upon the politicians and the people who run this country and the local municipalities to come up with some idea on how to move this traffic along, because one idiot decided to make a left turn somewhere, or jammed on his brakes, or was looking at his cell phone or her cell phone and got into a major car accident. It has to inconvenience 500,000 who have a home to get to, who have work to get to. Okay, so you get the idea. I just got so frustrated over, and that was just traffic. I then started seeing things in my world that just pissed me off, really did. So I started what they called the weekend rant, and I would come on and I would rant about it. And it did well. Under the Anonymous Andrew brand, it did well. So I decided and said, hey, people are liking this. So I brought it over and made it its own podcast called the Weekend Rant Podcast. And that was my second mistake. It took a dive, okay, because people, I think they were looking for it in the Anonymous Andrew realm in the world, and I took it out of there. And to ask a loyal follower of mine to then go look up another podcast that I'm producing and try to find it, follow it, share it, review it. It just was too much. I was lucky to get the listeners that I had. I can't pause this recording because I'm on a Mac. So let's talk about Riverside for a second. Riverside is a platform that is like Zoom, but it emerged aggressively after the COVID pandemic, and it's not for webinars. It's not like so. Zoom was really built for webinars, for large corporate meetings, for TED Talks. The 12-step programs grabbed onto it when they couldn't go to their AA meetings and NA meetings and whatever meetings. And a lot of book clubs and a lot of all these clubs use Zoom to all come and meet someplace. But it wasn't, or the quality of the audio wasn't superb. And there was a problem with editing. You couldn't like get a good file out of it, blah, blah, blah. So a whole bunch of, because 10 years ago when podcasting really started was like back in 2010 or something. It was a little before that. There really wasn't, you'd have to record on your own QuickTime. Like you'd have, if you have an Apple, you would record on QuickTime or whatever recording software. Now, especially with remote, like if I need a guest, if I have a guest, I'm in New York. If I have a guest who's in like San Diego, you can't do that. You need a good internet connection and you need a good platform that's going to bring us together, record the files, and then in the beginnings, Riverside didn't do this. They just presented you with the files. But over the years, I'm saying from 2021 to 2024, they really invested. And now it's I think one of the best recording softwares out there. There's Zencaster, there's Squadcast, there's a whole bunch of others, and they're good, but they all have a learning curve. And if you're new and if you're using one, stick with it. If you're looking to play around and learn and get the best one, you're going to have to play with them. Some of them have a free trial. You can play with it with a month. I'm with Riverside, and I think I'm going to stick with it for now. I've had problems, a lot of problems, a lot. Like I've had to call support almost every week, but it was more growing pains for Riverside. They were growing. They were adding more and more and more features to their UI. And they kept changing the dashboard and they kept changing everything about how to operate it. And me, the user, couldn't keep up fast enough. So last week, when I saw, okay, there's the promo clip, all I got to do is click here and put it here, and now I can download it there. Now, the next week later, it wasn't there. All of a sudden, they moved it. They moved everything over to a whole new section. And yes, they had these little things like, hey, click here to see what's new this week. But me, with my ADD and the fact that I'm just impatient, didn't want to read that. So I would try to figure it out on my own, and that's my bad. So I'm angry at Riverside for upgrading so quickly and so often and taking away some of the things that were cool. But some of the things that they did made it easier. I just have to learn what they are. So it's kind of a catch-22. Like if I would just slow down and learn what they're giving me, it's a better product. I just got used to the old one. Okay, 26. This is where we're headed. I am wrapping up season 4. I am doing a year in review. I'm working on it today. I'm on vacation this week. So I'm putting out many videos. You might see 4 or 5 new episodes dropping in 1 week. I'm just cleaning up. I got to get the episodes out. I had 12 of them in the can for the past 2 weeks from digital dating. I had to get them out. And then I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the weekend rant. It's not doing well, but I haven't nurtured it. I haven't given it to like a lot of love and promotion. I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to, and maybe even bring guests on. I'm thinking of having people come on and give their opinions. And because half of podcasting is if you have a guest on, and then because the guest comes on to promote something. It could be a doctor, it could be a therapist, it could be an author. They're trying to sell something. They're trying to get something out there. And if they come on my show, it only benefits them to take my show and share it with their audience, right? So my audience gets to see it and their audience. And there's a good chance that if you're an author and you got 33,000 people following you on Instagram and you play my podcast on your Instagram, 33,000 people are going to see it. Whereas the 200 people on mine are the only ones who are going to see it. So That's what I need. I'm going to start bringing guests on the weekend rant. So, all right, I am slowly starting to ramble a little bit off course here. I wanted to just to come on and say, first of all, thank you to do know I have some very loyal listeners. I see the numbers every week. They're consistent. So there are a solid handful number of you that listen every week. And thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. There's some that I know have drifted away, and I hope that maybe you'll come back. But digital dating is going on a hiatus. All right. Season 4 is concluding this week. And I have one more episode, which is a woman who slept with 100 men. She wrote a book about it. And I'm going to talk to her about that. And then we're going to close season 4. And then it literally is going to go on a shelf. I'm going to sit it there for a while. The episodes will be there. You can listen and I'll promote it. And my social media will all be about digital dating. And I'm going to give Melody my full time because the Cult podcast is doing very well. We have, like I said, I think it was over 15 grand of people, something like that. I could be off by numbers, but people are listening and more people are coming. And we're going to expand and try to get that cult podcast to become, because cults today, there's a niche. So dating, the dating podcast world is saturated, oversaturated. The cult podcast world, there's not a lot of cult podcasts out there. Yeah, there's the 50, but compared to the romance podcasts, which are probably upwards in the thousands, no comparison. So anyway, and then the weekend rant, I'm going to just, I have to figure out how to do that. In the meantime, all of this, I have to get up and go to work every day. And I hate my job. I hate my day job to the passion. So I'm just going to throw this out there. If anybody, you just happen to admire me, you happen to like me, or you're looking for someone in the IT world. I do IT work. Obviously, I'm a podcaster. Obviously, I was told that I had a radio voice when I was younger. I did voiceovers. So I'd be more than happy to, I'm open to opportunities. I want to move to Florida. So there's a lot going to happen this year, but I just wanted to touch base with my audience because it's been a long time since I've had a one-on-one with you. And so listen, it is 2026 in 2 days. So it's December 30th. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Have a very, very, very happy New Year's. Safety. Please don't drink and drive. Please, 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 please. And have a great New Year's Day. And maybe I'll pop on and talk to you guys in a couple of months again. So, Anonymous Andrew, if you see me anywhere online, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, drop a line, say hello. I would love to hear from you guys. And just, I'm approachable. And the ladies, if you find this mug cute, drop me a line. I'm single. All right. All right. Ciao. We're going to talk soon. Bye bye.